I'm taking them.
Don't want to hamstrung yourself, actually. That would be a bit of pain. Cool. So welcome everyone. We have well, as always, a relatively tight agenda. So um just share screen. So just before I get started, um we've got a relatively tight agenda, got minutes, typical updates. We have some AFMM2 and approvals for ballot to get through. Um, some more from Brett around family member history, some work on endpoint, medication request, stuff related to sex and gender from Ruben, and then some more identifier work from Richard. Before I kick off, has anyone got any amendments for the agenda today? Any additions, changes? Wonderful.
Yeah,
All right.
Oh, could I just?
suggest. No, you go, Brett.
Oh yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, I'm just gonna reshuffle to put provider directory above family member history. I'm just doing that
Brilliant.
now. So I'll
And
just
by that you mean
update
endpoint?
endpoint. What did I say? I don't know.
Provider directory.
Yeah, yeah, endpoint. So and to note as well, Ruben's ticket is he
After
won't be
11.
he won't be here till 11. So
Yeah,
just
no
note
stress.
that. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So hearing no amendments.
And hang
Um,
on, Heath has his hand up.
oh, sorry, couldn't see that. Go ahead, Heath.
There's still a couple of outstanding issues around the medication request status and intent as well. Um, so I do have the proposal for the um, extension, but there's those two items that were carried over from last meeting as well.
Yep. Uh, Brett, do you think we'd have time to roll them in with Heath's items just to stop from swapping the context?
Yeah. Good luck. We're running about half an hour over on the timing.
Oh,
So.
we're running half an hour over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can.
Um,
I mean, we'll see. We'll have to see where we get to. Yeah.
Heath, would you prefer them addressed instead of your item and then circling back to this item after at the end of the agenda,
Um,
or add them at the end if you'd.
yeah, let's add them to the end. I think if the extension might be less contentious, perhaps.
Okay, brilliant. Less contentious sounds great. All right, so we've circulated the minutes for the previous meeting for approval. I'll just scroll through them so you can see that they're there and they've been complete. Um, oh, if it's going to let me scroll, we've got our recording and then previous minutes. Would anyone like to make any adjustments or edits to those previous meeting minutes? Great. After this item, Jane, I'll pass back over to you. Um, all right, so happy to entertain a motion to approve the previous minutes.
I'll move that, Richard.
Thanks, Richard. Anyone to second?
I can second it.
Brilliant. Thank you. What was your name for the transcript?
Uday.
Uday. Beautiful. Thanks, Uday. So Brett, can you launch a poll, please?
Can. Right. Well, coming in, I think we're up to 19 on the call.
I think so.
I'm up to 15. Last few seconds.
I can't vote because I was chairing, can I?
No.
Cool.
Good point. Um,
But Brett, you can and you have in the chat, haven't you?
yeah.
Okay, no, you've already done it. Gotcha.
Yep. I think I will call an end. Last chance.
Thanks, Brett.
Okay, so we have 14 affirmative, 0 negative, and 3 abstentions. Thanks.
Brilliant. So motion carries.
Yep.
All right, I will hand over to you, Jane.
Nice. Okay. Let me share. Okay, so number 2, we have hand over Brett.
Governance, yes. So this is just timelines. So I just wanted to point out the timelines for things we need to do in prep for the balloting coming up in August. So today is really the last day for PSSs and intents to ballot to go through. Hence the few items we have on this call now. So that's noted. Next call is probably on the 1st of July is probably our last chance to make any meaningful decisions with content. Including in terms of adding things into the spec and getting it done in time. And the following meeting is probably our last chance to get FMM1, so have stuff that is included but draft. It's your last chance to get it to FMM1 to be included in the ballot content. So just to note that. So I think, yeah, try and plan anything that really needs to be done. It has to be done in the this today or next time, probably, to have it happen. That's it.
Okay, Richard. Richard and Paul.
Was that a request for me to say
Okay.
something? I didn't quite catch it. I
Yes,
just caught
on
my
the
name.
agenda, Richard.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah. Okay. One of the things was examples for HSPO and HAE. I've been talking to the people who've been working with the people from Services Australia, and Services Australia say that there should be the examples should be available about the 24th of June. So that's the feedback on that.
Could I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Does that mean that we'll get like a test arc like we've done for IHI and so forth, or more that there will be specific examples that will be demarcated as like test ones?
I don't know what they're going to come back with. I asked for some examples, and they've been running it through their processes for some months, so I'm not sure what will come back. I'm expecting a few examples, but yeah, it could be an arc as well, or instead.
I might have a chat with, or possibly even Services Australia as well, around because we've got the HL7AU test data repository, and so we've got a bunch of things that are already like assigned, like HPIOs and like Medicare provider numbers and even LSPNs in there. And so I think it would be great if we could have you know, like that sort of thing tied into some of those personas and then available in the HL7AU test data repository. So yeah, cool. I would appreciate, I guess, knowing when this stuff is available, what we can do with that.
Yep. Okay. Yep. I'll talk to you about that after the meeting, and
Yeah.
yeah, and then we can probably talk to Lloyd, who's the guy who's been working with Services Australia on it since the person who was doing it has gone on long leave.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks,
I've,
Richie.
I've also put a future agenda item to revisit that because HSPO and HAE data type identifiers are still at FM0. So we wanted to add those into the examples and go for FMM1.
Yep. Is that to talk about now or later?
No, it's just that I put it on the future agenda because we have to either deal with it on the next call or the one
Yep.
after.
Sounds good. Yep.
All right, thank you. And Richard, you'll send that through when you receive those.
I can't understand you. I'm sorry.
Sorry,
Your
you'll
microphone.
send those through when you receive them on the 24th?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. I will let the work group know when I know something, certainly.
Great, thank you, Richard. Okay, does she have anything next on the agenda?
Yes, thank you, Jane. I might share my screen if that's all right. I think it'll be easier.
Yep.
Okay, just give me a sec, please. So I should be sharing now. Can everyone see the Jira ticket?
We can, yes.
All right, I'll make it slightly bit bigger. All right, so these are the last three AUPS artifacts we need to get to AFMM2. So it's AUPS pathology result observation, AU patient summary practitioner role, and AU patient summary related person. So these were already endorsed by the AU core group in the last meeting. And we need, today we just need to get the FHIR group to do the same. So just quickly, what AFMM2 means is that it builds on AFMM1. So it means the artifacts already exist and are reasonably stable. So to get to level 2, we need to show that they've been tested across at least 3 independent systems covering the majority of the core data elements. So that's 80% or more, and those results need to be reported and accepted by FHIR group, which is what we're doing today. So these 3 artifacts are already at AFMM1 out of testing in Rotterdam that Heath and Heath and Danielle went to connected in Rotterdam. We got some additional testing done. So all of these now have been tested by at least 3 independent systems with more than 80% of the core elements. So the AFMM2 criteria is met. So I'll just quickly jump to the testing page here, where we can see the full coverage report. So, so we've got for AU patient summary practitioner role and AU patient summary related person, we have the 100% coverage. So both profiles were tested by 6 systems, and all 6 systems tested all must support and mandatory elements. And for the AU patient summary pathology result, we've got 95% coverage with 11 systems testing. So if I scroll down to show these results, we can see that the only element that has not quite been tested by 3 systems is observation performer. So this was tested by 2 systems. So based on these results, the AFMM2 criteria is met. And as I said before, the AU core group already endorsed these as AFMM2. So we're just asking FHIR group today to endorse AFMM2 as well. So I'll just stop here. I'll go back to the JIRA ticket, and I'll just stop here for any questions or comments about this JIRA, if anyone has any. No?
No, doesn't look
Okay, I can make a motion then. All right, so I motion that the FHIR group endorse these AUPS artifacts as listed on the screen as AFMM2.
Seconded.
Thank
Richard.
you. Thanks, Richard.
Oh,
and would poll, please?
yeah, no worries. Here we go.
You want me to put abstain because I'm chairing?
Oh, yes, you can't vote. Sorry. All right. Let's give it a couple of seconds more. Countdown 3, 2, 1, done. All right. So we have so go with me in the chat, 14 affirmative, 0 negative, and 4 abstentions. Passed.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I will stop sharing now.
Yeah, I'll reshare the agenda. Can everyone hear me now? Yeah. Better?
It's a little better maybe, but I think you're just going to have to
So,
speak really loudly.
Really loudly? Okay. All right. Next up, I have Brett on the agenda for AU-based R7 and PSS.
yeah, cool. I'm going to try and bang through this. Would you mind opening that document up, Jane? We'll just eyeball it. So this is a PSS. We've done these before in the group. So this is we've neglected to have a PSS for R7. So I think we've been working away towards this release without doing the project scope statement needed to go to ballot. So basically, if you scroll down a bit, we'll just look at the details. So we have essentially the A-based project, which we know about. So nothing has really changed in that definition of the project. And just looking at the project needs there, we're going for the R7 release and rolling up changes from the R6 release. And we're supporting AU Core and provider directory new content. And that's about it. So this is really a pretty similar statement to previous releases. Um, and yeah, so basically we're supporting delivery of various things, including needs of the community. So for the product info, we're basically updating R6, so this will become the new standard if passing ballot. Oh, I have missed.
Mm.
I mustn't have saved it. Yep. Well, we know who we are. I'll do conditional. I'll put the FHIR work group there. So yep, that'll be necessary. I'm hoping the rest of the document I've got info there. I have nothing much has changed here. Danielle, I still have you as the FHIR IG facilitator, but um, I'm
If you
happy
don't
with
have
you.
anyone to swap out for it, I can do it just this last once. It's
Yeah, cool.
fine.
Thanks. Yeah, so I think it's more. There's definitely like I'm involved as well, but I didn't want to have my name on all the slots. The Yep, and we still have our interested parties, which I think are unchanged from previous work. And I believe that is all of the material. Oh, actually, no, we've got more things. So, developing, basically, CSIRO, Digital Health Agency, and myself have been mainly doing updates to the IG itself. Um, we are in our AU realm, R4, as we expect. Um, there's dependencies, so obviously the downstream specs are listed there as dependencies as we kind of require that. Location of the spec, which we has not changed. We have no variance requirements. This version will not be backwards compatible, and we have some specific breaking changes that are listed in our changes. We know that already. External references to code systems are unchanged, so we still rely on those key terminology sources. And the rest is pretty much standard. Danielle.
I Yeah, all of that looks normal to me, and I think the obviously the conditional things that you've stated are good. Can you pop back up to the first page, and then we have the field that is project need, and we've got the TBA there for AU provider directory. Do we need that?
That was more that there's no release yet. No, that was, yeah, we could probably take it out.
True.
Yep.
Yeah. Because I don't even think you need to necessarily list the versions. Like
No,
the
that's
project need is true, that's sort of version independent, I think.
okay. That's good. I'm happy. Yeah, that's fine to change. I'll just remove the TBA and make sure the fire work group is mentioned in the work group area.
And then I assume it would be like NA in co-sponsoring. Well, not
Yeah,
NA,
yeah,
it'd be like none.
yeah,
Sorry,
just no,
none
yeah,
for
it's fine.
co-sponsoring. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. Then, yep, that looks good to me then.
Cool. So I'd just like to move we accept our PSS for the project we're well into.
I'll second Marika.
Yeah. Any further discussion?
Mhm.
No.
Nope.
Can I start a poll? Okay, cool. I'll go ahead. There we go. Polls up. Votes coming in. Couple more seconds. Seems to have stabilized. Okay, gonna go 3, 2, 1. Last chance. Right. So I have is that one plus one, Richard? Affirmative for you?
Um, I don't remember seeing the pop-up, but maybe I did.
That's all right. I'll count you in. So overall we have 14 affirmative, 0 negative, and 5 abstentions. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Brett. I've switched back to my headset. Is that any better?
No.
Not really.
And it's still going to be Brett for the next one, but we're on to the nib.
Yeah, we're onto the nib document. So yeah, nibs are our intent to ballot. So we definitely intend to ballot. So this is to just confirm that. So this is just the process to push this through to be listed officially on the next ballot cycle, which is in August. So if we scroll down on this one, this is a one pager. Um, so basically, it's just listing we're doing the R7 release for August, and we're superseding R6. We're responsible as the group. I'm the primary contact. So our ballot reconciliation for R6 happened, and that's completed. We don't have a variance statement required for a base. There's an expectation that there'll be FMM updates, some there, but so there's definitely FMM items for AU base that are included on the agenda already. So that is as yet not complete, but is expected to be. And we are not backwards compatible because we do have some breaking changes already added to the intended ballot. And that is all the information. So yeah, so this is our official affirmation that we're going to go to ballot, and this nib will yeah, that's it. So that'll let us go ahead. So any questions on this stuff?
I'm feeling pressured because I have to present a nib and I filled out the fields differently.
Doesn't
Part
matter.
of that is because I
Free
think you've
transition.
got a bit of creative license, I think.
Yeah.
So August 2026 would be Q3
Yes, in the old system.
2026. And
Yeah.
mine's going to say Q3 because that's what the form said I had to say.
Yep.
But yeah, I agree with all of this content. We're going to go to ballot. And yeah.
Cool. A motion? I will motion we go to ballot. R7. Thank you.
Can I get a seconder? Thank you,
Oh,
Marika.
Marika got first. Yeah, cool. Marika seconds. So I'll start this
A poll? Yep.
Yeah.
Is that better? I have.
Oh, you much better.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Richard. Obviously Zoom wasn't picking up my headset. It was doing the sound. I was going, yeah, getting sound through it, but obviously it picked up the mic on the laptop.
Sometimes when there's more than one headset mic available, it gets confused. It takes ages.
Okay, votes are coming in. We've only got half the people. All right. I'll give it a few. I'll give you a 3, 2, 1. I'll end the poll. Last one in. So I have just one affirmative from me in the chat. So overall we have 13 affirmative, 0 negative, and 5 abstentions for the record. Thanks.
Thanks, Brett. Okay, now we have Danielle.
Yep, awesome. Thanks for teeing that up. So this is the AU Core Notice of Intent to Ballot. So as far as I know, actually, it's only these two, like it's AU Core and AU Base that are going to be going to ballot in this August period. So, uh, I mean, it's AU core. We've filled out the ballot name the way the instructions say to. We're going for working standard, which we already are, but we're going to keep that going forwards. That's the ballot type, not for comment. We're superseding 200. We're expecting that to be a 300. The target ballot period is Q3, otherwise known as August. Um, and I mean, even though that we've moved on in HL7AU around the structures, because we're using the old form, um, in the old way of doing this, the primary responsible group was the AU Fire one, although this is now the AU Core one, and the one who's actually like doing the work is AU Core. So that's why that looks like that. I'm the primary contact, and from our prerequisites declaration, all past ballot reconciliation has already been completed. Our FHIR, our IGAU variance statement is present. We also have some updates for that because we have a new profile coming in. And so that's also scheduled for, I think it's the next AU Fire Work Group meeting to run over that because we've now got a doc-ref profile that's coming in. And from Fire Maturity Model, that says yes plus requested because all our existing profiles have FMM assessed and endorsed. We've got some new ones though. They are also on the schedule, and that's I linked the meeting agenda for the firework group where that is scheduled. In terms of backwards compatible, I've used kind of the text that we have the last time. So we're saying no, and that's because there are new profiles. So we currently have an assessed position for AU Core that every time we add a new profile from what was previously an unprofiled resource, because that comes into capability statement requirements, we make a statement that this is not backwards compatible. And so that's why we've got that text there, no, because we've got new requirements, but the existing profiles that were there from R2 are backwards compatible. And that's all the info for our notice of intent to ballot. Any questions around that? Alrighty, I will motion that we approve the AU Core notice of intent to ballot.
I can second that, David McKillop.
Thank you, David. Okay, we'll get a poll happening.
Okay, votes are in. I think we just about there. I'll go 3, 2, 1. So with the chat, we have 16 affirmative, 0 negative, and 3 abstentions. Passed, all good.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. That completes our nibs. Okay, so next on the agenda we have endpoint terminology. Do we have Samuel?
G'day, how you going? Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Cool bananas. I'm a long-time lurker, first-time presenter. I'm at ADHA with Richard and Uday. I'll share my screen. I'm not too crash hot with Zoom, so I apologize if I make a boo-boo. Just get set up. Share. All right, can people see that?
Not yet. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, cool. All righty. So today I'll be presenting a short talk on a proposed binding for the connection type and payload type, and this relates to some work that we've done recently for AU Base for the endpoint profile. Just see if I can. Yep, cool. All right. So as you can see, background, there's the pull request. I think that was just recently accepted. As I've mentioned, we're talking about two elements of the endpoint profile, in particular, the connection type and the payload type. And in simple terms, what that means, just to give background, for connection type, if you connect here, here's exactly, sorry, if somebody say something? If you connect here, here's exactly how you must communicate so we understand each other, and the payload type, what type of healthcare documents or data can this system handle? Okay, so here's a proposed structure that we're looking at. So core to this discussion today, what I'm ultimately, or the agency is ultimately looking at doing, could be summarized as a rehoming exercise. So there is terminology that exists currently in PD, and we would be looking at using that in base and applying it to these elements on the endpoint profile. So there's a justification in doing that, in that it's being used in PD. NHSD derives from PD, so it's a start state to go forward with, which future conversations could be opened up about, further improvements down the line. But for beginning start state, it seems like a reasonable justification. So that's what we would look at doing. So in connection type, from the R4 standard, I believe that binding is extensible. So we would keep the same binding strength here. And for the payload type, we put preferred. So I'll elaborate further on that as I go on. So what does R4 endpoint connection type look like? So it's the, as I've said before, technical connection details for exchanging data. So it's a data type of coding. We would propose putting the same binding strength of extensible. I've got a little bit of a summary here of the codings that exist. As you can see to the right, I can go back and we can dive through the actual URLs themselves if so wished. What does R4 just say about payload type? So it's a codable concept. Its strength is example, and it has a code system applied to it, which is just very broad. So there's a little bit of a problem in the sense that it's probably lacking descriptive, like it can do a lot of things, but it's not really tailored to an Australian context. So that's it there to the right. It has a lot of stuff. So it's just a bit of a summary there that I've aggregated concepts of what it can do. All right, so what does PD currently define? So, yep, again, we're talking about a coding. It's extensible. And what we have, in addition to the code system beyond what R4 defines, we also have this SMD interfaces code system. So very useful for us in Australian context, because we can talk about secure message, which doesn't really get borne out in the R4 code system. All right, so for payload type, extensible, it has the codes on the right hand side, as you can see, and yep. So basically, a lot of V2. Why are we interested in making this change? So endpoint in Australia has been primarily used for secure message delivery. The R4 endpoint profiles mainly supports many protocols, but lacks relevance, and there's no SMD compatibility, no coverage of HL7v2 message patterns, and misaligned with how endpoints are used in Australia. So applying the terminology from PD would benefit us in that it adds Australian specificity, matches the messaging ecosystem, so secure message, V2, and CDA, and it still allows evolution beyond secure message, in that the original R4 code system allows you to describe FHIR. And FHIR endpoints and FHIR message. So one of the feedback points that we received during health, as an aside, for Health Connect Provider Directory, which I'm also working on for the agency, was some feedback that the profile that we were using didn't allow the capability to describe other things, so such as FHIR. And what we would be looking at doing, in future, having this terminology would allow both, I guess. So the agency would propose that the AU Base Endpoint FHIR profile leverages the following terminology: the Australian endpoint payload type and the Australian service interface. They would be applied at a level of extensible on connection type and preferred on payload type. That said and done, like I mentioned before, the strength applied at the R4 level is extensible on connection type, and just example on payload type. So we'd probably step it up a bit on payload type and keep the same on connection type. And yeah, in R4, sorry, core, which is a parallel piece of work that we're looking at, well, we are doing at the same time as the base endpoint, would be extensible. Correct me if I'm wrong, Stuart is on the call. This allows for a meaningful description of endpoints used in Australian secure message context. But like I mentioned before, the codes that are available in the other code system that underlies still allow for, future FHIR descriptions at a later point. The terminology itself has been tested and validated through implementation in PD and derived by the NHSD. So benefits, just to reiterate, implementation adds an additional code system to the value sets applied to the connection type connection type beyond what R4 describes. This allows the describing of Australian secure message delivery endpoints. The value set in R4 applied to the payload type is generic and not rationalised reflection of what documents are currently being circulated in the Australian healthcare system. Therefore, applying Australian-specific endpoint payload type terminology is a better means of describing current happenings. So the terminology is already being used by NHSD and Health Connect Provider Directory endpoint variants. For what would be happening is we would use that, and we would derive from that in a future state to increase the technical standing of the work, and promote further visibility, and therefore, creating discussion about maintenance and improvement of that standard, which would underlie everything. This work represents a rehoming of the terminology from provider directory to AU base, and allow for wider use than just provider directories. So that is the grounding for the justification, but it's not limited to that. And another benefit is that it'll reduce the maintenance burden on NHSD and Health Connect Provider Directory. One of the points of discussion I'd like to raise is the strengths of the terminology bindings. So we would probably table, starting with extensible on connection type and preferred for payload type, but that's open for discussion. Is there any questions from the group?
Yes, Danielle has her hand up.
G'day, Danielle.
Hello. All right. I was suggesting in the chat that we deal with this as the separate decisions they are. One of this is moving the code system from AUPD into AU Base with all its attendant editorial rules around that. So I think that is a thing that we can look at. The others are the value sets, and I had a couple of questions to just because I haven't done a detailed analysis on them, to just get a bit of a sense on those, and I think we can vote on that. And then the other bit, as you've mentioned, is the binding. So I think we can just tackle that. Like, let's just make decision,
Sure.
decision, 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 decision.
Sounds good to me. So your first point was about the what they contain. Is that right?
I think the first one we could easily deal with is potentially the lift and shift of the code system. Like, that is literally all that's being proposed. Yeah, that there is an AUPD code system, and the suggestion is to uh, basically publish that in AU Base.
Correct.
All right,
Brett
that's
has his hand up as well.
Oh, which one are we talking about? Because there's the
code
service and
system first, I think.
yeah, but there's two code
There's
systems, aren't there?
two.
Because
Oh, I thought there was
there's
only one. I didn't realize there were
nah,
two being
there's
discussed.
one for
Yep.
interfaces and one for payload
Payload
type.
type, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So
there's
let's pick one.
connection type, and then what was the other one?
Payload type.
Payload.
Payload type.
Payload type.
Yeah. And I think
And
all of these are actually defined standard, like in both sets. The interface specifications are Australian standards for each of those interfaces, and these ones are the MDM ones are actually agency specs. They're the point-to-point exchange specs for the agency, and um, the referral message ones are aligned with um, the HL7 Australia
The ADRM.
referral, ADRM, yeah, referral and reporting. Yeah.
So are there any objections to publishing these two code systems in AU Base?
I would just ask I know I think the interfaces spec is very much framed in terms of SMD. Yeah, it's called SMD interfaces, and I think we should let the editors define that code system more broadly, so it doesn't say SMD interfaces.
Yeah, I like that too. That
Yeah,
we're going to want
yeah,
to talk about more than SMD. It would be nice
yeah,
to have
because I
a
don't want to
code
create new.
system that
Yeah,
we can add those SMD ones and other ones too
yeah,
whathout renaming the code system
What's
later on.
its
yeah. In fact,
actual code
the
It's
system
name is
title?
the name is fine. I just think some of the narrative
Is that the
and the
actual code system title, like Australian Services Interfaces in AUPD, or is this a
So the value set, that's
yeah,
the name.
no, code system?
But then the code system is SMD.
yeah.
Don't know
So
what I
if you,
thought.
I've got a blurb. The blurb is a screen grab on the
Okay.
right. Yeah.
That does make
Yeah,
it a little different for me. I assumed that we could lift and shift, and whether we decided to ever deprecate these codes, we could call this an old code system or otherwise. But if what we're trying to actually propose is an Australian specific code system that
yeah,
happens to be using the codes from the old one, then this isn't just a lift and shift proposal. It's different.
yeah. I think we should. Well, I think we want the content to be the same, but
Mm.
I think we should call it. It's essentially an Australian extension to the endpoint connection type code system, right? So I think we
Yep.
should call it AU endpoint
Australian
connection
inter
type.
Australian
Yeah,
interfaces.
yeah,
I-
yeah. Or leave it to the editors to pick one. But we should get the name right. We should get the name right, at least. I just don't want it to be an SMD code system. I want it to be
Sure,
a
sure. Yep,
Even though
that's
it
generally
currently
an
is an
Austra-
SMD code system.
yeah, that's all the codes that are in it, but potentially there
Yeah,
might be future ones. Yeah,
true. We could have
yeah,
another code system, but
yeah,
okay.
yeah. Yeah, we could, but I
Connection
don't want to do
type.
that. I'd rather just have one for that purpose.
just throwing it out to the group. Any ideas on a name? Just spitballing here. Australian interfaces.
No.
I would
Paul's
look.
saying NZ need them too.
Sorry, I was a little bit
Well, they could
garbled.
do. It's going to have the Australian domain on it, so that you can call it what you like over there. The the
Uh,
yeah, it's yeah, it's we have some other Australian extensions of existing code systems elsewhere, and I think we should just go in a similarly aligned pattern with
Hmm.
naming. Um, so, for example, the Australian identifier types and the um, I can't think of any others, but there's some others.
If that's a established convention, then that sounds reasonable.
Oh yeah, I don't think we have to vote on like the exact wording of the title. Like that just
Mm.
gets tiring when
Yeah,
the poor editors are trying to meet their
yeah,
editorial
yeah.
conventions.
Can we do it just by the principle is that we would name it as a for the concept rather than the specific SMD use,
Sure.
and then
Yep.
come back. Yeah,
Yep.
I can make suggestions
Hmm.
because it'll come through as a change anyway. Yeah. But I think the terms we want to include are the ones already
Hmm.
included. Yeah.
So if that's fine, should I make a motion with that caveat that this is the name's up in the air, but the content is the content for now? Andy, you've got your hand up.
Just looking at the endpoint connection type, the kind of the granularity of the codes in there. Like when you've got, I just wonder whether deliver acknowledgement, it's very, very granular in terms of the specificity of the interface, whereas the codes that are included, like things like IHT, IHE, that's a whole family of interactions. Whereas these codes are getting to a particular interaction, which seems quite a
The
different
the problem is we don't have
approach.
a discover we don't have a the problem is we don't have a discovery mechanism to know which particular interface you're implementing. So we can't locate.
And that's normally
It's
by local agreement
yeah.
too, Brett. So,
Yeah. So the specific one means like when I hit that endpoint, I
mm,
expect that specific interface to be there. It's because it's not like it hasn't got a framework like FHIR or even IHE. So it's
yep.
there's no discovery tools on that. So you can't determine what it is by connecting to it.
It's also a
Yeah.
one-to-one binding though. So
Yeah.
if it is very specific and you want to use the same endpoint for multiple things,
Oh, you can.
Mm.
Yeah.
there's only one.
Yeah. But you can do that. You can list
You
multiple
can't.
times. For,
The
How
data
can you?
type is coding. You get one and only one code.
Or you say no. I think you're saying you would put
yeah,
multiple
multiple entries.
endpoints. Yeah.
Yeah. Because they're each servicing a particular interface. Yeah. It can be the same endpoint. Doesn't matter.
But it's still not going
The
to be
same.
enough. You're still going to need further detail because there's no definition of use. I mean, this is still an abstract. It's a transport response delivery. So you still, in terms of understanding the semantics of it, I don't
It's
know what you win.
it's in the PD spec. It's specifically attached to AS whatever. It's actually a full spec definition of the interface. Yeah.
I'm not sure who
Connection.
had their hand up first,
Yeah.
Richard or Danielle.
Connection type changes quite a lot between R4 and R5 and R6, which are almost the same. I think the sort of issue that Andy's bringing up are perhaps about how do we want to use connection type than whether it's valuable for us to have a code system that contains extra Australian codes to use in this space. And I'm quite convinced that we will want to have a code system with extra Australian codes to use in this space, and that such a code system could be used with R4 connection type or with pre-adopting stuff from later versions. So I think the idea of having a set of local codes, a local code system that includes these codes which can be used in this space, I think that's quite I think that's quite a obviously good thing to do. I think how we use that is going to get quite messy, but I don't think that's part of what we're discussing at the moment.
Thanks for that, Richard. Have you still got your hand up, Danielle? Sorry, just
I guess
my
I'll
screen's
make
changed.
one final comment. I don't mind bringing the codes across in a base. We are using them, but I am nervy about trying to go, well, this is going to be a code system. We'll be able to use this safely with bindings when it looks like we're deciding to totally expand the purpose and scope of this. And as Andy pointed out, like the granularity, and I support a lift and shift, and I'm concerned about a decision to incredibly broaden this thing and just put them all under one code system URL. That makes me a bit nervous.
Sure. Okay. So that would be the alternate approach, is just lift and shift versus this thing grows a little bit. Do
We're
other
likely have
people?
to. We're,
Because can I
we're
ask, like,
likely to have
where do you
to.
think
We're
it's
likely to have to
growing?
undo it.
Like,
Yeah.
how would it grow? Like, is it in the
Mm.
same axis? Or were you thinking totally
Well, it won't
different
be
codes? Because
SMT.
as we pointed out, the current
Won't be
extensible
SMT.
codes are totally different to what's there.
Oh, they're all interface specs. They all have a spec. They're interface specs.
So we have an interface spec specifically called seal message delivery deferred mode.
Yeah. I just put a reference. The terms themselves reference the AS standards. They're NS Electronic Health domains. That
Yeah,
identify
look, I
exactly
won't
the
block it,
interfaces. Yeah.
but
Yeah, they're fully
yeah.
defined. These are probably the best defined interface conditions other than FHIR, right? So it's yeah, they're specific to the specific roles in the secure messaging implementation. So they're the different parts of the secure messaging interfaces.
So would we expect that a FHIR IG could be coded as well for a particular FHIR interface?
Yeah, but that's a choice we have to make down the track because you can also get that through capability statement and other things. Yeah.
Heath?
I can see why the first three that are different, but I'm struggling with the last two. They seem like one interface to me. They're just different acknowledgements that they're getting delivered. But maybe I don't know these standards or these interfaces well, but I'm trying to imagine what they actually are. And it just seems like it's an acknowledgement delivery transport, irrespective of what level of acknowledgement we're talking about.
It's the difference between polling and an immediate delivery response, Heath. That's all. Is the endpoint a place where you retrieve the acknowledgements from, or is it
So
something you?
it is a
Yeah.
different protocol.
No, well, you're either retrieving queued up batched acknowledgements, or you're posting an acknowledgement to the endpoint.
But the protocol is just to request a delivery response.
The bottom one is about retrieving your queued up delivery responses. The second last one is about where you post a delivery response to.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. I guess in the interest of time, should I make a motion on this, the inclusion of it?
You can.
Yep. Okay. So I would make a motion that the terminology as it is for this element in PD would be moved and applied to the endpoint profile in AU base with a caveat that we would look at the name and come up with an alternate name for the code system to be more Australian specific and a bit broader than SMD interfaces using conventions that exist. Danielle?
I think we have to have a seconder first, and then we open for comments, and then I'll have a crack.
Sure. Does anybody second that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Comments? Yep.
My comment for friendly amendment, can we shift the motion to just being about publishing the code system and not also include the binding in the profile? I'd like that to be a separate decision if possible.
Yeah, I deliberately left that out of my wording. We can cover that off. It's
Okay.
just the code system.
And could I clarify, this is to include as draft in AUBase?
Yep.
Cool. Just making sure everyone knows.
And those URLs don't change at all? That's what they are in the current spec.
No, they will. That would have to be done. That would need to be an expectation because that was the work that already had to happen to AUPD anyway, if they stayed in AUPD, that it has to match the current required conventions for HL7AU. So that needs to happen. I'm assuming there's no objections about that. There are some specific terminology rules.
It's like a poll.
Yep.
Yep.
So
I'm not actually quite sure we're voting to ensure that the terminology that will be a new code system anyway actually matches the agreed conventions. That's what we're voting for. And I'm a little bit shocked that we even have to vote for that.
No, we're voting for the whole ticket, aren't we?
Well, has the friendly amendment been accepted yet?
I think so. So,
Oh, good.
okay.
It's not really an option, is it? It is. It will be that. So yeah.
I'll profess my naivety. Do I vote?
You can.
Yep.
You should. Yes. Yes, no, you should.
You must. Right. I can see votes coming in. We're well on the way. Great. I'm going to give it 3, 2, 1. Ending. So with the chat, we have 12 affirmative, 0 negative, and 8 abstentions.
Cool bananas. I guess that leaves the next question of the strength.
Maybe we go next code system. Because that was one, and then we're going to the second one.
Yep.
Let's do the next code system. Yeah, I agree.
All right, so we have payload type. So just to recap for this one, what R4 currently has, I'll dive back to here for payload type. So it's an example binding strength, and it has quite a bit. I will open this up and see if it works. Rightio. Is this the... So, yep.
That looks like connections.
That's
connection. Is that the wrong one?
Yeah, that's the wrong one.
It's the wrong one. Okay. All right. 2 seconds all.
I can drop a link in the chat to payload type. Let me just do that.
Sure. Thank you for that. Can people see that?
It's not very informative, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's quite a bit, and I think the main problem is it doesn't add specificity about the Australian ecosystem in terms of what documents are what. So that would be the main failing of this. So that was a short recap. And what do we got? Payload type here. These are the codes that are available under the code system in PD. Yep. So the name itself being endpoint payload types, pretty broad and generic. If are there any objections in the group if I make a motion on this one? No. So if the chair is comfortable, I would make a motion that as part of the AU Base endpoint work, we would apply the terminology that currently exists for PD to the payload type element.
Sorry, that's a binding conversation. Can we just talk about
I'm
just bringing the
going
code
too
system
far.
into AU Base?
Yep. So I would propose moving the code system into AU Base from PD. Is there a second? Sorry, Marika's got a hand up.
I just wanted to clarify. So what you've got on the screen, they look like displays or definitions to me. Will it be a case of these are the things that we need to define as codes and we'll provide codes at a later?
It's
Or have you
existing.
it's existing? Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, it's very specific. It actually references again, it's a registered set of payloads with specific profiles defined.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah. So if you look at the terms, they're actually very specific as to which standard they're following. Yeah.
Heath?
They look like a bit of a mix between V2 message types and something else. I'm a bit confused about this list.
Sure, no worries. I was just trying to make it human readable. I will bring
I
up
don't think that matters because the discharge summary, the referral message level 1, referral message level 2. I mean, they're just
Yeah. I dropped the link in the
ref
chat, which is
messages.
but if you look at the
codes are actual
actual
URL.
Yeah, the codes are actually registered with the agency as specific profiles on V2.
So we're going beyond, we're actually refining the message type further with some kind of profile.
Yep. Because there's no other way to do it in V2. Yeah, so these are actually, if you hit those links, they'll actually go through to the NS Electronic Health space. It may not resolve, but it's in that
It didn't
space.
resolve.
Yeah, it's in that space though. NS Electronic Health, actually those ones are HL7 Australia ones, which are defined in the
the
ODRM spec.
bottom. Yep.
Yeah. The bottom ones are agency ones, which are
same trouble. Yep.
Yeah. They're actually there, but they don't resolve.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I think we can separate the actual codes that go into that system and just agree that we need to change the
so the point is that it's a profile of the V2 message, right? It's not just an Australian V2 message type. It's actually a more specific than even that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, including CDA documents.
Oh, yeah. They're the MDM ones are CDA ones, yeah. But they're the point-to-point specs the agency publishes as well. So they're actually got attached specs with all of the payload rules in them.
Yep.
Basically. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I mean I think that the interesting question is because V2 itself is a type. And if you can only have one, it would be the specific one, probably, right? These are all questions about how you use it, though, I think.
Whoa, why can you only have one? Surely you can support many of these.
In R4, I'm not too sure.
I
I'm leaving that to
I'm
leaving that to the PD spec.
Yeah, payload type in R4. Sorry, in R4 endpoint payload type is codable concept 0 to many.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good then.
Yep.
That's fine.
Cool. It's the connection types one.
Yeah, this one.
Yep.
Yeah, and you can't group. Yeah. Cool.
Any questions? Oh, sorry, Andy's got his hand up.
Yeah, I guess obviously this is very V2 focused, and my concern is that this is for one particular implementation. So it's very implementation specific, for you know, for the agency use. I don't know what the value is. I certainly couldn't call this the Australian endpoint payload types, because obviously Australian use will be much broader than just a document-centric kind of V2-centric view of data.
Sure.
So
I agree. I think the code set needs expansion. Like it doesn't include, it's all V2 stuff.
Should the code set be
The
much
value
bigger
set,
before we have the first value of the
the
code
value,
system?
but the
Or
value
can
set
we have
contains everything, right? They're like this is used with the other generic payload types in a value set that you bind. So it's not just these. Because the payload types value set, like if you click on that, you'll see it's all the general ones. No, it's not. It should
No.
I think that we want
Yeah,
to have a
yeah.
code system.
Yeah,
I'm
you're
thinking
right.
we want to have
We should include all the general ones as well in the value set, but we haven't talked about that yet.
Mhm. So it's in a similar vein as how connection type does it. So this sort of just gets sat on top.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, because these are just Australian specific ones.
Yeah. We need to
Yeah.
include the others as well.
Yeah, yeah. And you'll definitely want to do the others. Yeah.
So I guess we need to separate the two though. We move this code set binding across to AU base, and then we also then need to include all of the other values from the other value
R4.
set into
Yeah,
this
they
one.
are two separate
There's three.
discussions. It's let's
There's like
publish
three
a code
decisions.
system.
Mm.
Yeah.
so the problem is that the value set is too small, not that the code system is too small. Is that right? The code system is immature. It only has a small collection of what may be hundreds of codes eventually. But the trouble is the value set doesn't include anything that's not yet in that tiny little code system, while it should also include other things. Is that the problem?
This value set needs to include the codes from the international
Yep.
code set as well.
Yeah.
All right. Is there just general agreement on that? That would be a desirable thing?
Well, I think initially we're working on the code system, and this issue about the value set is part of a thing that we're not getting ready to vote on. I think we're getting ready to vote on what we do with the code system, and then the other thing is about the value set is tied much. It is a different question.
That sounds like a reasonable way to slice and dice it. So just keeping it very blunt, should I motion on this code system?
So I think you already
becoming-
motioned, and I think we were
Yep.
going for a second.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, if I didn't express it clearly enough, I think in my mind the conversation has changed. That we're talking about this specific component, just the code system becoming part of AU base, and then how that looks with a value set and still pointing back at the R4 standard one that comes from R4 as well. That different again, but that sounds reasonable. A second.
Can you restate the motion, please?
Sure. I would propose that the code system, as seen on screen from PD, be applied.
Sorry, can I just? It's a value set, not a code system.
This is the code system.
Oh, okay.
No, the
just the code
page is
system.
a value set, but we
I
can
know.
adjust all the codes. So we can
Oh
we
yeah,
can
we just want the
say,
code system.
yes, these
Good
codes
point,
are
Jane.
brought across, with the understanding of the HL7AU editorial rules. Yeah.
Yep. So motion that these codes are brought to AU Base with editorial rules from HL7. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Richard.
Thanks, Richard. I'm going to poll Brett. That was
Second in. I think we've got everyone. Thank you. So the result is 12 affirmative, 0 negative, and 5 abstentions. So it has passed.
Cool. Okay, so
Can we do a time check, Jane? Because we're
yeah,
not going
we're
to get to
really
anything
we're not.
yet.
That's what I was just about to say. So we still have a couple of outstanding things on this, which we will need to revisit, but we also have a number of things on the agenda. Is there anything that we absolutely have to get to on that agenda in terms of making sure it's Brett, do you have a view on that?
Do we need to do the medication thing?
Do we? Yeah. Yeah. I guess it's just if anyone wants to make the R7 ballot, we need to
So
push that
for
forward.
my
Yeah.
items, Brett, I'm expecting them to be quick. And I also want to flag I can't attend the next FHIR work group meeting because I am on leave when the next one occurs. So
Well, we should bump that up. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm happy to pass the baton, and if there's time left at the end, we can come back.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
thanks,
good.
Camille. Okay. Are you okay with that as well, Heath? Can yours be moved to next meeting?
I think it will struggle to do it in 15 minutes, and also, but I'm concerned about the ballot 7 comment. So I don't know if that is sufficient in the next meeting or not.
So we might need to discuss trying to hold an out of session, like an extra
Possibly.
AU base.
Yep. Okay. All right. Let's get Ruben. Do you have something to share, or?
oh no, we can just go to the
Oh,
tickets.
okay.
I don't need to share anything.
Am I still sharing? No, I'm not. Okay. Share. Okay. So first one, gender binding of extensible with these values is problematic. Over to you.
So we should probably have a look at the description first further down before we come back to my proposed disposition. So this is a terminological related comment from Graham. He's asking why, if we have values of male, female, and non-binary, we would have an extensible binding, because in his view, non-binary would subsume everything else. It's almost like an other type code, or at least that was his interpretation of this. And so he's suggesting we should either use other codes with better definitions and values, or just make it a required binding. So I think this was originally against AU Core, and it's been transferred to AU Base. Brett's made some comments which are pretty much aligned with where I was going with this. We can't make this extensible because non-binary does not, in fact, subsume everything else that's neither male nor female. And that's because the definition of this concept is gender identity. It's a personal self-belief of your own identity. And you cannot have any assumptions made about this subsuming anything else. So with that in mind, I also consulted with the gender harmony leads in international, and I've drafted the disposition up above if we want to scroll up. It provides the sort of more detailed background on what I just said. Sorry, if you're sharing, Jane, can you scroll to the top?
Yep.
So first of all, it's establishing the context of this value. It sits in the individual gender identity by extension from the International Extensions Pact, which is defined as an individual's personal sense of being a man, woman, boy, girl, non-binary, or something else. Accordingly, no single word can cover every personal sense. And so the next is just a whole lot of explanation on things that certainly would not be subsumed by non-binary. So two-spirit is one example that I call out there. And although some people may use non-binary as an umbrella term, it should definitely not be construed as a subsuming concept in the form of an is-a relationship. And we can't say that that's then appropriate for all people who do not identify as male nor female. So my suggestion is to then find the proposed changes non-persuasive, but I'm also suggesting that this be a non-persuasive with modification resolution, because I think it might be important to actually call this out in the spec. And what I'm suggesting is that we add an additional statement in the gender and sex guidance page, and we're happy to wordsmith this if we need to say, other than the data absent reason values, the gender identity values and the bound value set should not be assumed to subsume other values. For example, non-binary should not be considered to be a subsuming concept for all other gender identities that are neither male nor female, and to put that after the statement which reads, in AU base, the value element, etc., etc. So happy to take any questions on that, and if there aren't any, to move that disposition.
Richard.
Which data elements are expected to make use of this value set?
We use it in a binding for the gender identity, our adoption of the gender identity extension. And that's adopted in a number of profiles, including patient, practitioner, related person.
Okay, thank you.
So just to be clear, Ruben, the only change is this additional clarification text?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
No other comments or questions?
I'll move we accept the disposition with the one grammatical correction there. Change should be to be a subsuming concept, not to be subsuming concept.
Danielle, I second.
Thank you, Danielle. Vote, poll, Brett.
So. Okay, Brett's coming in most of the way there.
Michael is asking for 2 votes.
Yeah, no, it's just because he's non-binary. Cool. So I think that's pretty close to everyone. Maybe one more. 3, 2, 1. Okay. I'll end the poll. So we have with the chat 14 affirmative, 0 negative, and 4 abstentions.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next one.
And this next one is also from Graham, and he was seeking that the specification be clear about the Samoan tradition of FHIR, which is a gender identity, and it should be at least clear, and I think it should be another gender in the codes for the extension. So I agree with Graham on this one, and consequently, I made a request to the NCTS to actually add that as a gender identity in the Australian edition of SNOMED, and thankfully that was accepted and published in the May release of SNOMED CTAU. I then made a separate request to have that concept included in the gender identity response value set, which is also in the NCTS. That request is pending, and I'm expecting that it's going to be completed by the end of this month. So because that's the value set we have bound to the gender identity extension in AU base. Once that change occurs, it's going to be implicitly included as part of the spec with no change to the spec required. And that's because we don't bind to a particular version of that value set. And consequently, this problem is resolved, it's persuasive without any change to the spec if this disposition is accepted. So a lot of technical detail there. Happy to answer any questions on that.
And now.
Sorry, finding mute button. So 2 comments. Or actually, one of them is a question. So I know then we've gone for, oh, I don't know how to pronounce it, and I know you did. So
Yeah.
the new
Yeah.
concept.
Yeah, the new
And then
concept.
we have a number of others that obviously are also, I think, quite relevant within Australia, like
Yes.
sister girl, brother boy.
Yep.
So there are also considerations that
Yeah,
obviously wouldn't block this particular change, but they would be
that's right.
we would want to consider.
Yeah, they're being added as well, Danielle,
Well,
to
see,
the
now
value
that's where
set.
this makes me uncomfortable. This is a HL7AU value set. I know it's published under the content there, but we created it through a HL7AU meeting. So I think it should really only be through the HL7AU agreement that we do that. Otherwise, let's create a new value set that actually does get controlled by this work group. So
Well,
that's worrying
what
me.
agreement are you referring to?
Well, the very first meeting we had around this, which was when we were patient admin from HL7AU, which was a ballot thing for AU Base to create something and do the value set for it. And we agreed with the community on the exact values that were in it. We then had a ballot thing from even the last, maybe it was the second last ballot, which again agreed on the contents of the value set. So if that value set's contents is shifting
Hang on.
without the
What is
ballot
what is
stuff.
the agreement though? That's what I'm asking for.
I mean, we were in a meeting and we agreed together to have a value set that we would bind in AU base that would set a set of values.
So sure, but the particular value set here has no statement about it being controlled by HL7 Australia.
None of them do. I think that's something that we're talking about rectifying
Okay, so
behind the scenes.
so
But
we
all
need,
of the ones
I mean,
coming
I
from this
agree
group.
we need an agreement, but we don't currently have one.
So then is the alternative we create a brand new value set for the time being that represents the agreement of this work group?
That's for the work group to decide. I'm not sure what sort of impasse that might have on existing adopters of AU Base, AU Core, and anything else, but that I would suggest is probably a different tracker item.
Well, I don't know if it is, if what you're already saying is, regardless of what we say today, this is going to happen. Like that's kind of essentially
Yeah,
what you've just said. And
sure.
I'm not really
But
sure
it's the
that that
only it's the
represents the
only
work
way
group.
this could be resolved because that is not an HL7 Australia value set as currently defined. So we could either find this non-persuasive, which would make things a little bit tricky, because the change being requested is actually not to any artifact that's under HL7
Okay.
Australia's control.
So it could be persuasive. We just apparently need to do it via a new value set because all the HL7AU workgroup agreements, including the AU CDI things, are being published through NCTS. And while I know that the current copyright markers due to limitations are listing the agency, that doesn't mean they aren't actually meant to be managed through those different groups.
So there is no formal agreement that says that. So, and if there is one, I would like to see it because, that is extremely critical to the way we work.
That's in process. There are informal agreements.
And
Okay,
can you point me at, okay, sorry,
we
Jane.
only have 2 minutes, so I'm not sure that we're going to get to the bottom of this. And we also have a couple of other hands up. So, Brett, is yours related to?
It's related to this arrangement because the issue is that like we have some value sets that we understand to be changing, like disease and and things like that. But there are some that we believe are controlled by the work group. So the issue is like these are slightly more. The thing is, when you come to implementation, you have to consider these value sets as either being a supplied value set that will be consumed by your system, and you will, just update as updates happen, or it's built in to your definition, right? And I think this is one in the kind of administrative area where I think a lot of systems build in their concepts directly. So they want some handle on what's changing. Because if things can just come and go without consultation, it breaks specs. Because and that's the issue. Because it's more that there's different situations, I think, for different value sets. So yeah, I think we have to
And
think
that
about
that
that.
is
Yeah,
that is a known issue. The same thing can
yeah,
happen if concepts get retired in SNOMED, either the
yeah.
national or international level, which we rely upon in value set definitions. So this is why having good agreements and formal agreements are so important. And I completely support us creating one. I'm just not sure what the process and how we can get that done for R7.
Okay. And we're at time. Heath, do you have any suggestions? I don't know how we're going to close this out. We need to
I'm
continue this
confused
discussion.
basically on this one because what I'm looking at the profiles, maybe I'm missing something. It references back to the international value set in our profile. And so
It's
I'm wondering why we're even talking about
Oh no, we
NCTS.
have
we've got a constraint.
it's
Yeah,
we
there's a
had to be
constraint.
managed in a different way because it's an extension. Unless we redefine the extension, we couldn't do it. So it's in all the wording. You can see it in the guidance. In fact, if you look in the profile, it's in the comments and it's in the short as well in the profile for this that says that it needs to do the gender identity response value set, which was agreed through one of our previous ballots. But apparently not anymore.
I'm not seeing that jumping out at me,
It's
but anyway,
it's if you
that's
look at the
another issue.
profile for patient, it's a constraint, I think.
Yeah, it's a constraint.
Are we going to need an extra meeting? Who's going to check whether such a thing is possible or wanted?
Well, I think this is a question. Like, this is a question for us, like us as a committee, because like this has happened. We don't need to be involved because it's just happened, right?
But we're
At the
saying, is
moment,
that an issue?
yeah, I think that's more the issue than this actual issue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think so.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
it's
yeah.
procedural.
Okay. So just while everyone's still here, is everyone happy if we schedule a out of session because we have got multiple things that we need to close out before our 7?
That's a good question. Should we
Yep.
do an extra call?
Possibly, although I also feel that I could just go off and trigger the creation of new value set and rebind it as long as it has the same values. And as long as we get to create it, then that should be fine. I mean, it's still persuasive. It's not like it has to be the exact artifact, as Ruben pointed out. We just have to agree to the values. And as long as we agree to the values in this work group, then we meet the requirement. But
Yeah, I
once
think
that
that's
goes off
it.
the rails, that's the problem.
Yeah, we have to decide if we want to manage the value set or not,
We
right?
already
Because
did
yeah,
in
I
our
know, but if there's
previous
no
meeting minutes, and we have
guarantee,
multiple of them around how we are managing this value set.
yeah, I think if there's no guarantee though, we have to think about it. Sure.
The problem is that it's a moving target. We're going to be in maintenance mode for.
I mean, I think the real solution to this is actually to forge that formal agreement that says what the relationship between NCTS agency-owned value sets bound from and cosystems used in HL7 Australia publications is, because we've got loads of these all over the place. Sometimes we even reference sets which can change as well. In fact, probably a lot of the meds ones are changing every month. So we need to get a handle on that, and that's the real long-term solution.
I agree because that's confused me for a long time.
I will agree with you, and I'm just going to throw Michael Osborne under the bus. He's got a spreadsheet. As far as I know, there is work going on to actually formalize who
So
really owns what. Because of the NCTS publication process, it's stripped out well, there was no capacity for HL7AU ownership to be declared as part of that. So they look like all the others. Um,
But the
but
fluid
it's being
nature of
worked on.
this has implications for consumers of
yes,
this data.
absolutely.
So, especially in the context of obligations, not so much of a problem for producers, but consumers are going to be in trouble if it's a moving target.
Yeah. And also just to note, many other stakeholders may be using the NCTS published value sets outside of HL7 Australia, and they're a stakeholder that needs to be considered as well if these things are published without the necessary controls.
Well, I don't think that's our problem, but
It's not, but it's just it becomes
we're not the only
a
stakeholder.
concern for
Yeah.
the users of the content in the NCTS.
I mean, is this something a terminology working group needs to deal with?
Actually, it's probably at a board level, either the Spark steering committee or the MOU between the agency and HL7 Australia. I don't know, Brett, what do you think?
I mean, the firework group, we'll have to look after what we think the users of the spec are dealing with, right? So
Yeah,
we have to make a
absolutely.
decision. But yeah, I think how it actually operates is like, yeah, I think Danielle's point's a good one. Like if we know who controls those sets, it actually helps because like if we know it's an NCTS set that can take changes at any time, it becomes a current thing you have to load, right? And that's a requirement then of the spec if we use it. But if we need to manage the content, like the thing is though, there was I think some understanding that some of the value sets were controlled by HL7 Australia so that we could control what went in and out because it's really hard to write a spec if in some places in the spec we kind of want to control that. Not in all places either. So I think that's the problem. So I think we just need to develop it a bit. I mean, terminology work group can think about it for sure.
Yeah, we'll certainly provide input to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we need to work it out probably between the terminology work group and the fire work group. Just what's the difference between one like because I go medicines and diseases. I go that's no problem.
Yeah.
We expect those to change. Um, and you would load them or you wouldn't be current. But other areas, I think there's questions, and I think this is one.
Okay, so Brett, could we, as the co-chairs, take that as a action then
Yeah.
to set up a meeting with the
Something.
terminology group to discuss this
Yeah.
matter?
Yeah, we should probably have the discussion ourselves and then work out what we want to do. How about that?
All right.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I'm still wondering if we need another meeting just because we haven't got to.
We have Heath's topic as well.
Yeah. So are we saying today is the last day that we can talk about anything to get into R7?
Next meeting.
Next meeting.
Next meeting.
But that too will probably be a bit loaded.
Because we already have.
Running into
we
the
already
window.
set the agenda?
Oh, there's not that much on there, but there's things that are
Well, we
there.
have to push the rest of today's across as well, and
Yeah.
okay. What about at our co-chairs meeting on Monday? We look through the agenda and we decide if we
Okay,
think
quick.
we need a new one.
What if we just go hands up? Who would attend a meeting next week? Like, do we need an extra one? Do we need two to get through this content? And who would do it? Like, would you guys come to an out of session if we tried to do one next week? Pop your hand up in Zoom. I should put my hand up too because I would.
Yeah.
That looks like we have enough people to
Enough?
suggest
Okay.
that we should, yeah, try to go for that. Just to make sure, because we've got a lot of
Yeah.
important things to discuss, and so I think, yeah, we'll need it.
Okay. So
Yeah, I
same
think it'll
time next
be,
week?
yeah, I think that's a good idea, especially with the endpoint. If you want to actually get it in, we're gonna have to do the rest.
Yep.
So yeah.
Okay. All right.
Cool.
We'll send out an invite for the same time next week then, and co-chairs will figure out the agendas.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks, Jane.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Sorry we've gone over. Stop.
All good.
And we will
Thank you.
see you all next week.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Jane.
Thanks, Jane. Well done.